Well, as I said, it's the 911th meeting, so I would want us to just forge ahead. And so let's do so. Our new secretary is John Harrington, but he's busy taking notes. And so Phil Levine is going to give a review of the minutes of the last meeting, as his last duty as Oklahoma secretary. So Phil, let me turn it over to you.
This is a summary of the ATMoB meeting held June 14, 2018 at the Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics when we were in the Philips Auditorium. Club President Glenn Chappell called the meeting to order at 8 p.m. Please refer to staff fields regarding details from the June 14 meeting for the various club officer and committee reports. Announcements. Maria Batista is creating a form which will be available on the club website for organizing star parties. Mario Mata has been elected as one of the trustees of the American Medical Association. As author of the AMA white paper on light pollution, Mario will continue to provide guidance to lighting companies regarding the health issues resulting from bright LED lighting. Old business, none, new business. A collection was taken at the meeting for the ATMoB website Clear Sky chart. Voting was held for club officer board positions. Elected were President Tom McDonough, Vice President Rich Nugent, Secretary John Harrington, Treasurer Eileen Myers, Membership Secretary Chris Elledge, Members at Large Maria Batista, Alan Swiskey, and Al Takata. Glenn Chappell introduced a guest speaker for the evening, Kelly Beatty. His talk was entitled Mysterious Mars. Kelly gave a very engaging presentation covering historical and current astronomical observations and theories regarding Mars. We were outfitted with 3D glasses and treated to a front row seat of panoramic landscape views of the Martian surface from the various robotic landers. Glenn Chappell adjourned the meeting at 9:45.
Let's give Phil a round of applause. Outstanding secretary for the last couple of years.
I don't know if Bruce is here. Is Bruce here?
Let's see, Bruce.
Update on Mario.
Go do it.
Go ahead and advance. I want to talk about the two LVAS objects, one for this month and one for next month. First is Messier 4, the globular cluster in Scorpio, just right next to Antares. And the other night at the clubhouse, we looked at that with a couple of telescopes. I know Phil Roundsville is here. I saw it through his scope. Now, Phil has a great telescope. And I looked at M4, and this thing is awful. I know when I say, hey, this looks fantastic, but this wasn't M13 or M22. It's very sparse cluster. But what you want to look for is this row of stars right here. That's one of the things that LVAS wants you to see. Can you see that row of stars? And we did see it with Phil's telescope. So one of the things is, what's the smallest telescope that will show you that row of stars? Also, William Herschel said a lot of those stars were red. So see if you can see those particular colors. And the other thing is, where's the smallest telescope that will resolve it? I want to try it with a 4.5 inch. I don't know if that'll work, but I think in good clear skies it should be. And let's go on to the next one, which is August. And I haven't looked at this one yet. IC 1295, it's a planetary nebula in Scutum. And I was showing Maria this the other day. We were looking at M11, and that's a part of Scutum. Aquila's up here, and I always call that the toboggan. And M11 is right in this area here, but not that far away. There's a globular cluster, NGC 6712, which is shown up here. And I have seen that with a 3-inch telescope. It's probably an 8th magnitude globular. This is a lot tougher. You're going to need more than a little 3-inch telescope for this. And then a nebula filter is a good idea as well. People reporting seeing that with probably a 10-inch telescope. But again, if you're out in dark skies, you might be able to pick it up with something fainter. But the challenge here is just being able to see it to begin with. And what's the smallest aperture you can pick up there. So that's about it, and I hope you have a good summer observing this year. Thanks. Keep looking up.
You can tell by the color of this nebula that it's going to respond nicely to an Oxy 3 filter if you have one. I've seen it. I like to go to that pair right there quite a bit. And in my big scope, I don't see resolution in the glob. And I will say that nebula, the IC 1295 planetary, is very faint. But I'm working under like magnitude 4.8 skies. So my darkness, just there's no such thing. But with a nebula filter, especially in O3, that really pops out at you. So if you have one of those, you may want to give it a try. The only downside with O3 filters, I find, is that if you don't have enough aperture to drive light through that filter, I think the Lumicon one has an 11 nanometer bandpass centered on the Oxygen 3. That's tight, tight, tight. That's like everything else is squelched down to nothing. And this little narrow strip of green is coming through the telescope. So if you don't have enough aperture to drive light through that, it just darkens up everything. And I sometimes use the UHC filter because it gives a more pleasing view, I think. We see more stars with it. The one other thing I wanted to mention about while we're on observing committee is if you were with us at the clubhouse, gosh, it must have been just this last Saturday night. I was showing off some geostationary satellites. And one of them I showed was the GOES 16, or GOES East is the other name for it. And that's the fancy schmancy weather satellite that the meteorologists were all crazed over. And if you go into the clubhouse and look at the cloud data that's on the computer in there, that's coming from that satellite. So I thought that would be a fun one to look at. And then if you stayed a little bit later on, we saw a trio of satellites clustered together within 1/10 of a degree. And I looked them up, and that was there were 3 Amazonas Brazilian communications internet TV satellites that are parked over. They're right on the equator in North and South America. If you're interested in seeing geostationaries, come up to the clubhouse. We'll commandeer a decent-sized telescope, and I'll show some to you. They're easy to find if you know where to look for them. And I'll even give you my best secrets. I'll give you my secrets so you can find them for yourselves. They're fun to watch. Did anybody here last week was here at the clubhouse last week and saw them? Yeah, it's almost an illusion. They look like they are drifting through the star fields, when in reality it's the star field that's actually drifting past these satellites. Because they're parked, right? You can just, if you've got a clock drive telescope, shut the motor off. And they'll sit right there for you while the stars stream by. It's really kind of neat. It's really cool. Sometimes you can see the naked eye. They catch a specular reflection of the sunlight. Last summer, maybe 2 years ago, we were in the clubhouse 2 weekends in a row. We actually picked up naked eye geostationary satellites. So you don't need a ginormous telescope to see them. The brighter ones are 10th, 11th magnitude. You can get away with the 10-inch scope with those. But come up to the clubhouse, so I'll show you how to do it. All right, next slide. So Steve Clark is now here tonight, but John Reed is kind enough to do the clubhouse report.
Okay, usually in the newsletter we condense and just talk about the work party. So I'll just give a resume of that. The reports were for June 30th, Saturday. We arrived at 9:45, were met by the aroma of fresh brewed coffee and a box of Dunkin' Donuts provided by John Blomquist. We've ignored that. We haven't published that. John deserves credit. It really was summertime. Throughout the day, the heat index kept rising and the temperature climbed to 95. And so a special thanks go out to our intrepid 24 volunteers, who I won't name here, but you'll pick up a few names as we go through. John Blomquist had mowed the property the week before, and so all the debris, all the trimmings, all the rest of it was handled by John Stodiak, Paul, Destin, Will, Pierre, and Al. Meanwhile, Dave Proughton and Rich Nugent tore into the 17-inch Dobsonian, and that's housed in that permanent Greg Chase hutch.
Never try to clean a telescope hour when you have sunblock all over your hands.
The mice had departed, but evidence of their presence was found inside the telescope tube. The nests were removed and the optical tube assembly was completely cleaned and disinfected. The mirror was cleaned, inspected and reinstalled, and Dave installed a new wire mesh screen without holes or gaps. Now the only thing is, can the mice chew through rabbit wire? We'll find out. And as Rich mentioned earlier, we unfortunately lost our astro buddy and longtime friend Cy Valava this past month. We will miss his friendship and encyclopedic memory of our night sky. Work will continue at the next work party or before, as skies allow, on his old instrument. Rich has volunteered to take over Cy's duties and responsibilities, teaching star hopping to new members using the 17-inch dial. New members will enjoy Rich's approach to star hopping. The other item is mirror making started at 10 a.m. this day. Assisted by Mike Maddie, then Mary Jensen, then Ed Lose. Today's mirror maker was Professor Alaha Azam of Jordan.
On the screen.
She is taking the mirror back with her, or has taken it back this last Monday. And will take this information and the learned skill to assist her in creating a similar mirror making facility for her students in Jordan. The work part was her third day. I must say that anybody we always get emails about anybody going up to the clubhouse, I need a ride. Well, she showed up on the doorstep up there, having taken a taxi from CFA to North Station, a train to Lowell, and a taxi cab from Lowell to Westford. And she started pushing glass on that first day. She had a total of 4 Saturdays, one about a 4-hour day. The first day probably had 6
Some were
hours.
long days.
And then she had 2 12-hour days. It isn't written here, but Barry checked out the telescope with the suitable mask, and it was a 14th wave. So she's not going to code it, she's going to use it as a demonstrator so her class can play with it and see what a silver mirror can do. And she has a tool with the pitch on it. John Marr held a training class for the clamshell observatory with the 10-inch telescope. Lunch was served. Thanks everybody who cooked. Several machine shop projects were completed. While it was too hot and humid to apply the white stain today, that was for that day, we can start with the east side of each telescope enclosure and building at the next work party, and then work our way around to the north side. We'll try to chase the sun. Early morning, if we get started, we can hit that east side, but it may chase us around before we finish and get into the shadows on the north side. The next party after that will tackle the west side, which is in shadow in the morning. That's about it. Observing would have been possible between clouds. However, the mosquito reaction to the warm weather was such that no human wished to test their abilities. And I got a call from Steve Clougherty. He'll be at the clubhouse tomorrow night. He's sorry he can't be here tonight. He's at the airport. But looks like it might be a good observing night tomorrow night.
Might be. Thanks, John. I think Dave Brown should get like a Medal of Honor or something for going into that telescope too. That 17-inch, I've seen he's flushed that thing out with a hose before, and boy, the stuff that comes out of that tube is pretty scary. If it were me, I'd just flood it with gasoline and just finish it off for good. Boy, some scary stuff comes out of that tube, so I hope that wire mesh holds up, John. There are critters up there, they live everywhere. Even in the roll-off, there was a nest too a month ago in the roll-off. Crazy. You know, if you have never visited or rarely visit the clubhouse, you should come out and check it out. There's 2 scopes in the roll-off observatory and the 16-inch bead that's fully automated that John Mayer could train you on. The 25-inch Dob is an amazing telescope that a number of us could train you on. It's just a Dob. It's got a cover, a plug. That's about it. Ario is John Mayer, again, he would train you in that. And there's the 17 down in the doghouse, which is Cy's favorite telescope to use. And Dave did some work last weekend on that. We've been debating what was wrong with that telescope for a while. When you would look down into take an eyepiece out and look in, the reflection of the secondary looked like that. You could see up the side of the diagonal holder, the secondary holder, and what it turned out to be was a very poorly aligned axial alignment on the secondary. So once we got that, when Dave is the guy who figured that one out, I was about to bring up my laser collimators and just have at it, but Dave beat me to it. But now the collimation is pretty spot on, so then she gives some pretty nice images. It's a nice telescope. It's a nice telescope. So come on up to the clubhouse and check it out, you guys.
Don't forget the clamshell.
Well, I said in the Clemson, right, the 10-inch McCass. Yeah, that's, I can barely climb in and out of that thing, so I rarely go in there because I can't get back up. But anyway, yeah, you ought to come up there. Bring your insect repellent and come on up. It's actually a pretty nice time up there. So there's the telescope making committee report. John, you gave that for a second. That was great, thank you. And that continues on. Saturdays, Mike usually sends out an email letting you know when he'll be up there. And you know, if Allah can grind and polish a mirror in 4 Saturdays, so can you. And so it's just an interesting thing to learn how to do, you know. Anyway, okay, how about the next slide? Where are we at? Oh, it's the outreach committee. I gotta get a younger looking picture of me for that.
That is a young look.
That's
I can make you look younger.
That's the heckler.
I know, sign. So, well, we did a star party at the Innovation Academy Charter School about a month ago. There were about 10 of us that showed up. No one at the school had any real thoughts on how many people would actually show up. It was spearheaded by a couple of students who are now rising seniors, and they're planning to do more of this. So we geared up just as if there were going to be like 500 people there, because that number got thrown out at one point. It turned out there was probably closer to 50 people. But Bernie Kosecki is here. Bernie, where are you, Bernie? I saw him. Where is he? Did he find his way in? He did a walking tour of the solar system. That was awesome. We had telescopes. We looked at Venus, Jupiter, of course, Saturn, some deep sky stuff. We showed some double stars. And it was a pretty nice time. It was up in Tingsboro. And they're looking forward to having us come back up there again. So that was pretty good. 2 months ago, we were at the Farrington Nature Center over in Lincoln. And they were looking for help on August 10th. We're going to have a little tiny membership thing for the Perseans. Now, that's the weekend of Stellafane. So we've already told them that there probably won't be a lot of us around, but I know I can't go to Stellafane this year. So I'll probably go over there and help them out a little bit. We'll see what happens. Also, this is the weekend of the Conjunction, the Astronomers' Conjunction out in Northfield, Mass. If you've never been to that event, that's a nice one to go to. Small, intimate, family-like. Go there a couple of years, you know everybody. And it's a really nice little tiny convention run by Jack Megas and Dave Gallup, Rich Sanderson, Bill Harrington. They do a nice job out there, so check that out sometime. It's $25 to get in the door, I think. It's really nice. Northfield Mountain Environmental Center. All right, what's next? Oh, one more thing on outreach. I have to check with Laura Salem, and she is very, very interested in running a class up at the clubhouse on participating in star parties. And so I'm going to help her with that. We think we're going to do it sometime in August. If you've never been to a star party, if you've never done a star party, they're really fun. And you should come out and at least listen to what we have to say about what goes on at them and how easy they are to contribute to. Sometimes we even get fed. Sometimes we get fed. The folks at Parker Damon School always feed us that delicious chili. Right? They gave us those cute little bandanas this time. Some of them get pizza.
4 different varieties of chili.
Lots of stuff. They really take good care of us sometimes. So star parties, I'm sure they'll start up again in the fall. So, yes, sir.
I was just going to add, I was at, some of you remember Mike O'Shea from Popscope who gave a talk a couple of months back. They had a barbecue. He's leaving, going back to Canada. So they're kind of in a flux. It's a very young group. I was really surprised. They're all millennials. You know, I asked one just offhand, what year were you born? And he said 1993. I was in the throes of a midlife crisis at that year, and he was just born. But they very much, it's kind of like Laura Sales. They want some help as far as star parties, locating things. So I'm going to see if we can probably tie in. One thought is inviting them out to Westford whenever that meeting is. Another one is they're probably right down the street here. A lot of them could set up something even in the parking lot here sometime, and they find their way here. But that's a nice time because we do a lot of inner city star parties. So it kind of augments what we do. So that's another.
Yeah, it's like sidewalk astronomy.
And I was impressed though, just how young and enthusiastic. We talk about the aging of astronomy. Well, they're out there, but the thing with them is they're in flux. They're going to be here, they're going to be there. The group that I saw, probably most of them will be gone within 5 years. So they have new people coming in all the time. But it is, again, it's a nice outreach program, so we'll see if we can tie them in.
Yeah, it'd be nice to do that. Also, I read in the newsletter, Bob Finney, formerly of the Clay Center. Is he still there? I don't know. He's still there?
He will be a teacher next year, but the other activities are still in question for next year.
Okay. Because he was setting something up over in Natick, on Tech Circle in Natick, right?
Yes.
I have to look into that a little bit more. That sounds interesting.
Yes, we can We could do a little presentation on that maybe next meeting.
Okay. Peter, question?
Yeah, I was going to mention that tech center in Natick. I don't know how I fell into it, but like I'm a Facebook friend of it or something. They have a maker space, and I just saw an announcement within the last couple of days that they're going to be just going to astronomy things on every Tuesday and Thursday.
Okay, it must be Bob Finney.
Yeah, I have no idea what kind of scope they have or scopes.
I know where Tech Circle is. That's because Connor used to live over there, because CrossFit New England is over there at Tech Circle.
Yeah.
So I know where that is, like the back of my hand. But yeah, I want to go up and check it out. Bob's a nice guy. You should, if you're in the area, it's Natick. If you're in the area, check it out.
12-inch mead is what we're using as the primary scope there. Don't have quite the 360 down to the horizon that we had at the Clay Center, but it's a good site.
Good. All right. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks. All right. What's next? Any questions, comments, announcements? Yes, Eileen.
I have a self-serving thing. Stellafane is coming up. Stellafane starts, it's the 10th and the 11th, which is starts Friday. There are lectures all day. There are telescopes that people have made, all kinds of instruments, homemade scopes. Go and see them. They're fantastic. The same thing on Saturday. There is also demonstrations of mirror making on both days. Every aspect of mirror making that you'd want to know will be demonstrated there. On Friday also, or is it Thursday? On Thursday, the Antique Telescope Society is having their meeting at the Hartness House, which is a gorgeous mansion. It was Governor Hartness's mansion. But there'll be fantastic speakers talking about some of the old telescopes and how they were restored. There are now going to be 2 challenges. They're observing Olympics, and there's a list of 30 objects you use a telescope to find them, and you can win a pin if you do. And then there's binocular observing, and that's another list, a challenge list, and you can get another pin for that. So please come and have a camp out or stay at a hotel, and there's food there, and there's so many things to do. You'll be busy all day long. Is it? Not right?
Next question.
And great observing.
Some years back, they used to do a little like pro-am conference before.
Well, there are lectures all day Friday afternoon. I think it starts at
And Thursday, you're thinking of the Hartness House?
Yeah.
the Hartness
That
House.
is, it's happening again this year, but it's the Antique Telescope Society. That will be, the talks will be related to historical telescopes, instrumentation. John Briggs, who's a member of the Antique Telescope Society and former member of our club, organized those sessions, starting from the beginning. And since he's out in New Mexico now, he doesn't as directly get involved, although he's a member of the Springfield Club. He does come east fairly frequently. So he's involved with it this year, but you register through the Stellafane website, and anybody's welcome to come to the Antique Telescope Society parts of the meeting as well.
Also, a number of members will be giving talks at this convention.
Yeah, the ATMoB is a pretty strong presence out there, so. Paul, do you have a question?
Yeah, no, a comment. Just out of announcement. Good news, but first of all, bad news. Tom Sperrick was up at Stellafane. We have to do quite a few mowing sessions up there, and he was up in the back lot, way back, and suddenly realized that the tractor was on fire and leaped off of it, and it had stopped on its own and completely consumed itself. Tires are gone, everything. And I believe it ran on gasoline, so pretty flammable. But anyway, he got off all right, but he was way out in the woods. But people saw this enormous column of black smoke, knew something was going on, and were able to help him out. But the good news is that we raided one of the Vermont banks, and they bought a brand new one, and they're back to mowing. So anybody who's camping out at Stellafane, the grass will be mowed as usual. That was the good news.
Thank you, Paul. I was gonna comment on dark skies are at cellophane, we just mentioned the dark skies. Couple of years ago, I was up there on the observing field on Friday night, and just below the Showman, and I heard somebody asking about what town down there in the south is causing that light dome on the horizon. And I went over there, I overheard him say that. I went over to him and I said, that's the Milky Way. That's the Milky Way. He'd never seen it before. And and it was right down to the horizon. It literally looked like a faraway town, a little light dome. And I said, oh no, that's the Milky Way. It's really dark out there. It's pretty nice. It's pretty nice.
It's about 800 people now who go. It used to be around 2,000, 3,000.
Oh, in the 80s it was awful. There were so many people.
Around 800. But it's a big area. Plenty of room.
Yep. Yes, sir.
I managed to, when I was only 16 years old, I actually got to see the Milky Way galaxy. We're over my grandfather's house.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah, most people nowadays have actually never seen it.
I've seen it. I was
Very good.
16 years old when I got to see it.
Excellent. Peter.
Just to amplify how dark it gets of the cellophane, if it's clear, you can see M13 easily.
Oh, sure. I've seen the veiled nebula with a pair of binoculars before.
Yeah, I
From
remember
cellophane.
looking up and saying that couldn't be, and then putting my binoculars and
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's pretty dark up there. Any thoughts on the Nelm? Is it 6.5, you think?
I've never.
We'll have to test it. We'll have to test it one of these years.
We should.
It's dark.
Yeah.
It's dark. Cool. All right. Any other announcements? Any other thoughts? Shall we move on? What's next now? Old business? Any updates? Any old business? Good. Next. New business? Good. Like I haven't talked enough.
Can I?
Oh, sure.
Make a suggestion. My presentation has a lot of photos on it, and I don't think it's going to show up very well, and we're already like 20 minutes, half an hour late. So can I save it for September when we have a full screen? Is that okay?
Yeah, we don't have a guest speaker yet. Mari was going to get somebody who was involved with that satellite program. Who's the one that's going to do the planets?
Yes.
Tess.
Oh, yes.
And we still haven't got that speaker, but I think we could. How long do you think your talk would take?
Like 15 minutes. But it's just, it would be some, the photos would look like that. And,
He's going to give a talk in Stoughton.
Okay.
It's the same person.
All right, good.
So
Try to roll
that's
through
okay, then we will, because we
Okay.
started late anyway,
Yeah.
so we won't run over.
Good idea, Julie.
Thank you.
So this is so my little brief talk is on using virtual counterweights on a telescope. And they're about 10 slides. They'll go fast. Let's see. Connor's images, no. Balancing a telescope. Virtual counterweight. Click on that. See what happens when you open that up. Connor's images we don't care about. There we go.
Use this.
Oh, where's the?
Can we turn the lights down?
It's the laser pointer. So,
We'll switch off the lights.
sure, I got it. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Maria.
There's some on the other side.
Sure. So this is a picture of the Hooker telescope at Mount Wilson. It's a 100-inch telescope, and I was surprised to learn myself that it actually, has counterweights on it. I don't know if you've ever noticed it when you look at a picture of this telescope. Let's see if I can make this work. Oh, there it is. Where's the? There it is. Oh, it doesn't show up on the screen. That's funny. These tubes right here are counterweight tubes, because what they're capable of doing is replacing the upper cage assembly, depending on what they're doing with the telescope. And so it's important to balance a telescope. When I was thinking about this, and you all know that, if you want a telescope, no matter what kind of mount you have, it's got to be balanced out for the thing to work properly. The LIC 36-inch telescope, it weighs 25,000 pounds. And no astronomers are allowed to change the equipment out on it, because on one evening, an astronomer attempted to remove a piece of equipment and didn't hook the telescope to the floor and was injured when that 25,000-pound telescope decided to sail away with itself. So you got to really be careful with balancing your telescopes. I own, so how am I going to click these slides? I'm going to come over here and do it over here. Tear off the wall.
Oh, you can write, no, use the control.
Well, the control, you think it'll work?
It will work.
The pointer didn't work out.
You're going to press a button.
I did. It just doesn't show up. It just doesn't show up on the screen.
It doesn't show up on the screen.
It's up there. Let's see if this works. So, any telescope now you have, it's basically a C-star, it's a fulcrum with a lever. And you've got a balance point on the telescope, and you've got a big mirror down at the back side. Whoops, see, I don't like this. You have a big mirror over there, you have hopefully a little bit of weight up here. I'm a Dobsonian kind of guy. So here's my 20-inch setup in the backyard. And as it turns out, when I built this telescope, all those 25 years ago, before I could put these side bearings on, I needed to find the center of balance of the telescope. So I put it all together, laid it on the driveway on a big dowel, and found the balance point. And so I knew exactly where to put these altitude bearings. And as it turns out, the ratio is about 1 to 4. So that's the distance, about 1 unit here and 4 units there. Now, I know on the telescope, I have a lot of junk up at the top of the telescope. I like my stuff to be up there. Some people put finder scopes down on the mirror box, but for me, I just need it all to be up there. So there's a laser pointer over here, that doesn't weigh anything. I've got this big 80mm finder scope, that's the big weight up the top. The Lumicon dew heater over there, that doesn't weigh anything. But what's happened over the years with the telescope is after I balanced it, of course, and you've locked those altitude bearings into place, is that Eyepiece Technology has changed. and since it's nothing but the best for the 20-inch, this is my worst case scenario. There's a 21mm ethos and a power mate. The combined weight is a little over 3 pounds. And so when you throw those things up on that delicately balanced telescope, now you've got to counterweight the back end of the telescope. Otherwise, you'll never be able to observe it with any comfort at all. So what's a poor astronomer to do? Well, I just recently, like literally yesterday, put these weights on the telescope. My wife said to me, haven't you been working on that project for like a year? I said, well, it's more like 2 years. Because I wanted to find a nice, simple way to do it that was relatively inexpensive, that would be adaptable, so that later on, if I have to change it out, I can. And I was going to go to ADM and buy $20, between $20 and $30, $20 or $30 a piece counterweights. But what I found was if you go to Dick's Sporting Goods, you can pick up these 2.5-pound barbell weights for $2.50. And the hardware that mounts them to the telescope is a 3/8-inch bolt with a wing nut, a washer. This bushing here is actually 8 washers taped together with painter's tape. Because of course the washers are only 1 inch and the weight is 1 1/8 inch. So I figured, well, that's simple. Painter's tape, you can peel that stuff off all day long, it doesn't leave any residue, it's awesome. So for about $5, maybe a little more than $5, I put this counterweight onto the telescope. It made it look so much nicer. But still, when I put those big heavy eyepieces in, the front end of the telescope, when you get down to about 30 degrees, it just starts to sink down ever so slowly. So I can put my finger underneath it and hold it there. Or I always wanted to try a virtual counterweight. And so the virtual counterweight is just nothing more than a spring from the hardware store. And there it is attached in a sort of out-of-the-way place. And let me go back let me go back a couple of slides. Point to the screen, point to it there. So here it is right here. Here's the spring. It's anchored down there. It runs along this backboard here, through an eye hook right there. Runs up here to a chain that goes up to a little clippy thing. I'll show you close-ups of those things. Everything is attached by key rings. So that's a key ring right there. That's a key ring right there. This is nylon rope. And at the close-up of that, I can untie that knot if I have to. And here's a key ring. This chain allows me to adjust the tension on the spring. It activates at around 45 degrees. That's when the tension on the string starts to pull. The further the telescope goes down, the higher that string gets pulled up, and the more force the telescope feels by the spring. And like I said, I don't know the spring constant for the spring. I just went to the hardware store and went, yeah, this feels about right. But it's a kind of a nice way to do it. There's the close-up of the little clippy thing. So when I want to adjust it, I just unclip it. I just slide this off and adjust its position here, and then test it again, and it works out great. Now you can't counterweight your entire telescope with a virtual counterweight because it'll tip over on you. I use this just to take up just a teeny bit of extra counterweighting that I need. And it's adjustable, like I said, the further the telescope goes down, the more it needs to be counterweighted. The spring pulls it a little tighter, and it works out pretty well. I'm really pleased with the way it works. And that's it, that's my presentation. And so now, I've already called the agenda. Julie's gonna wait. James, you're up, right?
Yep.
James is going to talk about his PANOPTES. Oh yeah, here's that silly little thing. Always bring a backup. You're going to do a PowerPoint Sunday. Always bring a backup. Because the real PowerPoint's on that computer over there. We couldn't hook up to the computer here. So always bring a backup. Thank you.
I think we can bring up the lights. Will it help?
It'll certainly help for plugging in cords.
That's the one.
Do you folks have any questions about anything so far? Yes, ma'am.
I used a chain with a shoestring. With a shoelace. If I need to balance it because it worked for
sure.
5 years. I used a heavy chain and just attached it with a shoelace.
Well, CrossFitters do the same thing. Remember, Connor my youngest son lives in the world of CrossFit, or at least he used to. And I asked him one time, why do they have a big chain hanging off the barbell? And he said it's because it's an adjustable weight. It gets heavier. The more you lift it off the ground, that chain comes up off the ground. And you can do the same thing with a counterweight. Sure. Yeah. I've hung car keys off the telescope before, just to...
It warps it though, because it's heavy and it's wood, it's hanging on wood, so.
Sure. Nice.
Worked for 5
Just try
years.
quickly and then I'll just switch to his computer if it doesn't work.
You know, while they're working, just another thought, Tom again is going to be our president when we get back in September. And one of the things that helped me as president, I got a lot of people who give me suggestions of a speaker. So if you happen to see a speaker at a local event or something like that, let Tom know, give him the information, and we'll try to sign these speakers up. It was a big help for me. I think probably 2/3 of the talks we had were suggested by somebody in the club.
You know, the group that has excellent speakers is Skyscrapers.
Yeah.
The Skyscrapers Club down in North Citrus, Rhode Island, they have good speakers. We could steal speakers from them.
We picked them up from the conjunction too. That
Right.
guy that talked about meteors was at the conjunction.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, I got it at the end of March. It's fun to
I still think I saw him out in the parking lot scooping up rocks.
Well, those Jablonska meteorites look like good pieces of tie.
Here we go. Let's see if I pause. Here we go. So now
Yeah, I waited in line at the,
While we're waiting, I don't know if anybody saw the news today, but the towers at the old Cape Canaveral were imploded and fell over
Exactly.
this afternoon.
I think it was a day shift.
NASA is no longer going to be running it, so if you want to look on the news for the towers of Cape Canaveral. They went.
Yeah, I started thinking taking garage space in the right
Okay.
Okay.
See if I can make this happen. Okay, so folks who know, who've been attending for a while, have heard me speak a couple times about this. So just for context, this talk is going to be one of 3 talks in 2 weeks in Hilo, Hawaii. There's a conference on robotic telescopes, student education. In student education, I'm going to go attend that with some other people who work on it. So last year I was thinking, like, I'm not doing anything active with astronomy, just reading sky telescope, that sort of stuff. But I wanted to know what the sort of state of things was, so I went down to NEAF and NEAC to see what was going on, and looking for something that would be a good excuse to buy nice equipment, etc., but not have it sit in my basement, which is the reality that would normally happen. So then there were actually two talks that were particularly intriguing. This one, and then the guys who were talking about the Dragonfly array. But since their equipment is $250,000 worth of equipment on one mount, that sounded a little out of my price range. Whereas these guys, this project PANOPTES, they had been working for 5+ years to design a easy to build, reliable system that would sit outside all the year round for like $5,000. That's a little more in my budget. I don't think my wife is going to sign off on $250K for a nice toy for me. So I decided to sign up and follow along, try and do this. So they have this design, this system here. This is up on Mauna Loa in Hawaii, and that's about the 5th design they came up with. And I really like the idea that this thing will work all the time, at night while I'm sleeping, because I'm much better at sleeping than staying up and looking at the stars. The thing I didn't know was that when they said they were ready for beta test builders, that really meant I would be the first. There were a bunch of people involved, and one couple had started doing a build, but they stalled, and so the reality was I was going to lead the charge. Now, there were opportunities to work on software, to make a unit. I'm a software developer by day, and I know that if I were to start working on the software, I would just dive into that and I'd never get to do a build. So I gave myself a deadline. So NEAC was in early April, late July was Stellafane. I set that as my goal. 100 days, 100+ days, no problem, except for the fact that I was working for most of those days. So, and my wife therefore rarely saw me when I was at home, so I just off to the basement and started building stuff. So the first thing to do was to build the head unit, the eyes of the telescope. So the telescope, of course, most people tend to think something long, but this is 2 DSLRs, 2 Canon their cheapest DSLR, and 2 Rokinon 85mm portrait lenses. So these are a fairly, for a camera, they have a fairly small field of view, 10 by 15 degrees, but for telescopes, that's a fairly big field of view. So they're f1.4. One of the first things then was make the mounting place. This is what holds the cameras and the box together and attaches to the equatorial mount. So, cutting these half-inch thick aluminum plates and drilling and tapping and all the rest to make a secure mount for it. And then, it's a nice weatherproof box that you put everything in, except it's useless for seeing the sky without great big holes in it. So you gotta ruin that weatherproofing. Though, in fact, it is weatherproof in practice. The way that this thing protects the cameras from water is just by aiming it at the ground during the day. Which is quite effective because there's an O-ring seal around the lid, so it works very nicely to keep the weather out. So the first milestone was getting to this point. It was really very gratifying. I was really pleased, and that was early in the process. It turned out because there's quite a bit more to get done. So in addition to having the cameras and those aluminum plates in the camera box, there's also this board. It's got one of these Arduinos for those who are into electronics, voltage regulators to step down the voltage to power the cameras, relays to turn the power of the cameras on and off. Because it turns out that if cameras just, they're not set up, these things are not set up to be on all the time, 365 days a year. You're far better off being able to turn them off and on again remotely when they lock up, which turns out they do. So this is what the assembled unit looks like prior to adding bug protection, but besides that, it's got the board, USB hub, temperature and humidity sensor in there. So then running the whole system is a computer in what we call the control box, brilliantly. It's a Pelican case, which is one of these very robust weatherproof cases that we then, again, like with the camera box, we put some big holes in it because we need to get wires in and out of it. So it's got computer, USB, power, so AC coming in, and then everything internally is running on 12 volts. So we have this power supply actually charges a battery so that if the power goes out, the system can keep running. There's a sensor to detect whether there's AC or not, and the computer then checks every minute or so, and if it's run out, if there's no AC, it then parks pointing the cameras down so that we don't end up with rain when we do run out of power. It turns out my unit, back in February or January, I think February, we had a big storm here, lost power a lot of places in the state. This one's in Norton, Mass. I checked the logs. It lasted 2.5 hours on the battery. So it actually tells me the battery's too big. So we should probably go for a smaller one. There's this board that they provided. They sent me this board. The other ones I had to make myself. But this one, they sent me the bare board, and then I soldered on the parts. And by this time, this is actually the third one I put together. I was sort of skipping over things, just doing it fast. So I ignored the great big warning that they put in red at the top, say, go read this other document. Well, I thought, this time I'd skip that. So that meant I had to go and edit it to deal with the fact there was a mistake in the board layout. And let's see, so then to control that previous board, the relay board, we've got this Arduino and this cable connector here. And actually, I should say, I did a little bit of electronics when I was in high school, and so it was a lot of fun for me to go and do this stuff. This one was fun because this isn't the design they had. They had a design on a cramped half-size board, and the only reason they did that is because they needed this little connector, and the only place they could fit it was this funny little board they came up with, which made a nightmarish situation where you had pins sticking out the back, and then you solder a wire barely hanging on to the pin. It was just a mess. So I had fun coming up with my own alternative approach that worked much better. And then, so this is all preparing the Pelican case. The guy who started this project, Olivier Guillon, he's an astronomer at the Subaru telescope in Hawaii. Works on coronagraphs and using a coronagraph blocks out the light from the sun, so you can see the disk around it or the planets. So he set up this project, PANOPTES, as one. He calls it his finder scope. He wants a source of planets to go look for. But his favorite liquid seems to be silicone, because there are all these instructions for using silicone. You use silicone to attach these things, attach these PVC things to the bottom of the Pelican case. It turns out that, well, silicone is not, of course, an adhesive. It's a caulking material. It's flexible, and so I'm moving this thing around, and eventually it detaches. So I discovered that it's actually quite hard to get the Pelican case to adhere to things, because it's made of this, I can't remember, polypropylene or polyethylene, something that does not react well. Anyway, I made it just in time. The day before cellophane, I was still putting the finishing touches on. So then my son and I went up there. He helped me with carrying everything. And we had a good, nice, group of people coming by, talking to us about it. And I was very lucky. It was the eclipse year, so there was very much less competition in the mechanical space. So I actually got an award there, which was very nice. So then I got the last piece to be built after it was the pier, which is for supporting. You could use the tripod, but it would just have a little too much flex in it. So I contacted folks about how to get access to the clubhouse, the workshop there, and John Blomquist volunteered to help me out. So in fact, those are his fingers and his hands in there. So he helped me, doing the work on the milling machine, and then he got on the lathe and actually made the locating pin for me that the mount rests on, so that you can rotate it to do your polar alignment. And then got this installed at Wheaton College. So it happens that early in the process, and so it's the folks who put this PANOPTES design together had selected an Ioptron mount, and I didn't realize it until I just happened to be looking something up about the mount, that they're located in Woburn. So I just contacted them and said, hey, can we talk? I'd like to just meet you guys and talk about this project. And they then, I go in there with the mount and the head unit, and they start taking my mount apart. It's like, what's going on? Well, they replaced the driver boards because there were newer versions. So that was great, and they also introduced me to this professor at Wheaton College, and he then was so intrigued. He said, "Hey, I can loan you a dome." So that's fabulous. So I didn't go through all the weatherproofing that needed to be done because it's got a nice home in a dome. And he selected dome number 7, the farthest away, the least convenient, that they weren't using much anyway. So, anyway, so we installed it there, and then let's see if this will play. That's an animation, but you cannot see. I added dome control. I do not know why it's not playing. So I added in, it actually took me a couple of months to do it, but after it was there, so originally I needed to have the folks at Wheaton open and close for me, but now it's all handled automatically when the scope detects that it's dry and dark and clear outside. It automatically opens up. And that's my first light. Very blurry. It's like it turns out it's really hard to focus these cameras because they're inside that case, which blocks most of your view of the LCD screen. So one of our challenges is to actually help with that we still need to add some software to walk you through the process of turn a little bit and help find the optimal. But they do have software for doing the polar alignment. So it takes pictures of Polaris, both without moving the mount at all, and with slewing it quickly to make these star trail images, so that they can then analyze it to figure out where the center of rotation is. And I actually got lucky. Dome 7, that inconveniently located dome, happens to be the only one that has a view of Polaris. So otherwise I would have been having a nice view of the HVAC system when taking these pictures. So let's see, after that I switched from, once it was working, I then switched mostly to helping other people who were doing builds. For example, the State Department is now doing these virtual exchanges between schools in the US and in other countries. And this one in the embassy in Rome has worked with this school in Pistoia, which is near Florence. And they set up a virtual exchange with 3 high schools in the US, and each one of the 4 high schools will be building one of the PANOPTES scopes. And my main takeaway from that process is, wow, it's hard for a school and bureaucracy to order parts. You know, it's like they've had more time elapsed since they started the project than it took me to do my entire build, and they're still at the point of just acquiring parts and hoping to start in September. Also, one of the other activities was going to NEAF this year as not a presenter, a manning of the booth person. So 2 students in the center, Joe and Sean, are at Wheaton, and they have been my hands on site. So in fact, I've rarely actually had to go down to Wheaton. If there's something wrong, they go and take care of it for me. In fact, I got a message 2 days ago saying, "What's up with the scope?" Because somebody had reported the dome was open in the middle of the day and the scope was pointing straight up, which is not a good sign. I've checked. We haven't debugged it fully, but it looks like it was talking to the mount saying slew to somewhere. It was a night and a half earlier that it had been doing that, and it kept just saying slew, and it's like, okay, slew, and it was just got into an infinite loop, and so it had to get killed. Anyway, so we had a good outing there, and the nice thing is Sean and Joe got interviewed by somebody from Sky and Telescope. I don't know if that will ever appear anywhere, but it was nice for them to get the opportunity to talk about it. I've also worked a bunch on helping reduce the costs. When I heard the presentation, they said $5,000. It turned out it was at least $5,600. And I've now got that was with parts they hadn't bothered mentioning or that they didn't list. They said, USB cables. Well, those cost money. You have to find them somewhere. So I've been sort of taken over the parts list now, and I've driven the price down with all parts included, which I've been very pleased by. And then our really big effort that is to improve the documentation for how to do the build. And so we've got several people helping with that, including now there's a high school student in Phoenix who's doing a build, and he's been helping with writing some of the documentation. So, anyway, it's all together, it's been a really fun project. Any questions? Yeah?
Does the actual build costs include manufacturing of machining time?
So no, it doesn't. It does include
$35 membership.
30. There you go.
Membership.
Right, a membership. So it isn't necessary to have a milling machine. You can do all of the stuff with a handheld electric drill, but it's not as easy. So using either a milling machine or drill press. A drill press would suffice for everything that needs to be done. So, but I did include the price of the special drill bits, the counterboard bits. Yeah.
Why the choice of 85 millimeter lenses, and was the aperture, because I know those are Rokinon, you said?
Yep.
So were they 1.4?
1.4.
And what is I saw your first slide had the purpose of what they're looking at for planets, but you're looking at just a wide field of sky, correct?
Let's see. Yeah, so their idea was, or is, that we can do this by crowdsourcing light curves. So, which is a not yet proven situation. They did the light curves with 1 unit. We have yet to get enough units and process the data automatically to combine them. We're not yet at that point from an algorithm perspective. But, so I'm not sure I answered your question, though.
The other one was just about the lenses and
Right, so they were, the selection of 85 millimeters was sort of a trade-off of you want to get, it's photons on sensors is really the thing, and they have this thing they call ATMoB in professional astronomy about which sort of efficiency of an optical system, and it turns out that this sort of size is about the optimal point in terms of ATMoB per dollar. So you get a lot more ATMoB out of Keck, but you are paying, if you just rent the time, there's your grant money is paying for time on Keck, it's $100,000 a night for that. So, obviously, I'd like to have $100,000 for a night on Keck, but this will get you, a long way in terms of photons on the sensors, especially if we can get more of them built. And we have at least 10 underway at this point.
Jim, why 2 cameras?
So the camera and lens costs, let's see, right now it's about $500 or so for that. And so that's around 15% of your total cost. So by that 15% increase in price, you double your science data. And but you can't keep going like that because then you need a better mount. So you can probably get 3 cameras onto this mount, but not many more.
So each one is pointed at a slightly different area?
No, actually they're pointed at the same area. They don't have to be aligned perfectly because the data is processed independently and then combined after it's.
You're looking for variations in light intensity over time?
Yes, yeah. So it's basically the same as variable star observing, which is why I think it's an interesting project because you can apply this basic equipment to a variety of projects. So
I'm just kind of surprised that you think that they're stable enough to do that. If somebody must have thought this through, obviously.
yeah, well, they started in late 2010, and it was 2016, early 2017 before they were saying, "Come on, give us join in."
Yeah.
So they went through quite a few prototypes. Yeah.
How many hours would you say you had in constructing your unit? Granted, it's a prototype.
So I don't know how long I took. I got it done. Yeah, exactly. It's like I kept track of I kept a pile of receipts, but I haven't gone through and actually added it all up because I didn't want to be depressed. Of course, I bought several copies of various things because it's like, oh, that's the USB hub they said, but that's probably not ideal, so I went and bought yet another one.
Couple questions, if I might. First is, what kind of exposure time are you using?
It's 2 minutes is what we're using at the moment, yeah.
Okay, and how deep can you go with that?
Yeah, I'm a terrible astronomer because I'm much more the science guy, the software guy, so I don't know how deep they are. I think that the answer is it's around 10 or 11, but it's supposed to match up roughly with the test range, but I'm not sure I entirely believe that at the moment.
And I guess the other thing was, okay, 2 cameras, twice the data. But if you're pointing at the same place in the sky,
yeah,
I don't, unless you're looking for hot pixels in one versus the other,
no.
I don't see how you're getting really, at the end of the day, twice the data.
Right, it's actually twice the samples, let's say. We're not, what we want to do is combine the data to reduce the error bar by having a lot of data points that are noisy. We can then fit a curve to that to say and if we want to cut our error in half, we have to double the number of samples that we have. So obviously going to 4 is what we need to cut it in half again. Okay, I should let somebody else
speak.
Our final speaker of the night is Corey Mooney. Kira, you coming up with him? No. No? Corey Mooney.
I don't think
When Corey has finished and there are no more questions, we'll adjourn the meeting. There are refreshments across the hall provided by Mike Hill tonight. So.
We'll find out.
sort of fake that PowerPoint. Let me see. Yeah, this works. So I'm Corey Mooney. I've been a member here since maybe last September. I've got a lot of hobbies, and I like it when hobbies collide. So I'm going to talk today about 3D printing, casting, and then recently I've been getting into low-cost, electronically assisted astronomy. So we'll get right to it. So 3D printing for amateur telescope making. I'm going to be talking about fused deposition modeling. It's the most widely available to hobbyists. It's essentially a fancy hot glue gun. It's a CNC table, and it traces out a layer and extrudes plastic in a filament and fills in a layer, indexes up, and just does it again and again and again, and it builds it up layer by layer. The price is really coming down. You can get them anywhere between $200 and $1,200 for a capable machine. You know, it's not the cure-all solution. It has strengths and weaknesses. It's really great at making small, intricate, detailed parts. Because the geometry is free, you can do anything you want, almost, and get away with it. And it's division of labor. You know, you can design your part, print it. You can be doing something else while that's being made. You break that part, or you need another one, you just copy, paste, print it again. And the really, really interesting thing is you can share these designs worldwide. So when you come up with something, you can just put it onto an online repository. Anyone that needs that same thing can download it, you can have it. It's not so great for making big, giant structural things, no Dobsonian frames, and if you're going to be designing your own parts, you have to learn CAD. That's a big, big steep learning curve, but there's a lot of information out there. And it only makes plastic. So if you're not up to designing your own parts, there are great repositories online, Thingiverse and Umagine. You can search for things. Like there's an example here of an interferometer built by different slides, and it's all hardware supplemented with 3D printed parts. And NASA has a great page on data for landscapes and spacecraft. You can print little models. I have a bunch here if anyone's interested in seeing after the meeting. Here's what they look like. So, you know, a bunch of craters, Martian landscapes. So it's fun to hold, especially the moon craters. So familiar looking at them, to hold them and play with them in the light. And if you do go into CAD and start designing parts, the sky's the limit. So you can start augmenting all of your stuff and making little fittings for this and that. Solar filter holders, a dovetail adapter for a finder so you can put it right into a scope, or a bracket to hold a little astronomy camera with finders on it. And my most recent project, which is probably a little daunting as a beginner project, but the sky's the limit. You can buy off-the-shelf bearings and shafts and bits and pieces off of eBay and just augment it with 3D printed structural frames and worm wheels and brackets. And just bolt it together for $60 worth of components. You can have a star tracker, and I can share that to the world after I test it, fiddle with it, get it working properly. And it's here on the table. You can also use it instead of an end, use it as a means to an end. So you can make jigs, fixtures, soft jaws for holding things in the mill. Use it for other processes, vacuum forming in shapes, or you can lay up fiberglass on it to make cowlings, anything you want. And to segue into the next one, I primarily use it as casting patterns. So with casting, it's a lot like painting, where the casting itself is done quickly, but it's all the prep work leading up to it. It takes the time. So you can use a 3D printer to make that easier. So topics I'll talk about is just the basic furnace. The easiest way to melt metal is basically a vessel for charcoal, a way to blast air into it, and a container for the metal. It can be, like mine, a trash can lined with dirt, or you can literally make a hole in the ground and blast air into it. It's easy enough to melt aluminum. That's grossly simplified, and you should definitely look into safety and read a lot about it. Don't try this at home, so you know what you're doing. But so the easiest way to get into casting, because once you melt your metal, you need something to do with it. So the easiest way to make a pattern or a part is called lost foam casting. It's really, really fast and easy to make, but you only get to make one piece at a time, so it's not great for making a bunch of the same thing. So you make the part out of styrofoam, bury it in the sand, and then just dump the metal into it. The metal vaporizes the styrofoam and completely replaces it. They actually make engine blocks that way. It's crazy. But it's really fast and loose and easy to make stuff because you can use the foam as sort of layout. You can press it into parts. So I've got the impression of a dovetail. You can use that impression to cut the other pieces of foam. I have that hexagonal piece was pressed into my mount to pick up the bolt hole pattern. So no CAD, no drawings, no anything. You just sort of make it up as you go. Glue the whole thing together with a stick of foam. That'll be, you bury it in the sand, that stick of foam pokes out, you dump your metal into there, and you get almost a perfect duplicate of the styrofoam. So you can go from flimsy, easy to work styrofoam to solid aluminum and get 80% of your machining done, or done away with. You don't have to do it because you're almost in shape, and then you just finish it up, install it. And the next process is a little more involved. This is where the 3D printer becomes extremely useful. This is sand casting. So it's a reusable pattern. You don't burn it up every time. So it's a rigid model of the part that you want to make. There are now design constraints because you have to be able to pull it out of the sand. So there's a lot of learning that has to be done on what you can, shapes and different things. It's all about drafting angle, no undercuts, but it's all out there to learn. And so the process is you make your rigid pattern, press it into the sand, remove it, and then pour the metal into the hole. So with this one, I use the CAD and the 3D printer to make, if I want to make a metal piece, a machined metal piece, you have to start with a pattern. The pattern gets printed, you use that to make the impression. But with the 3D printer, you can do some pretty advanced pattern making stuff where if I want this part that has holes going through it, I can make a little piece that modifies the sand. So I remove that piece halfway through the molding process, and it's called the sliding gates, and you can shave off a little more machining time, or completely circumvent needing to machine. So here's a couple examples of the impressions. I always like this part. I always think of it as inverse sandcastle making, just making the negative space there, just like a beach sand. You pack it into a cup, flip it over, it's just backwards. So the great thing with this process is it's a lot more time invested in the beginning, but the yield is greater because you can reuse that same pattern and just keep duplicating the same piece over and over again. So for a mount which has 4 of those plates or 5 of those plates, it's the perfect process. And then you can finish them up machine. So the last thing I'll talk about is I've been getting into a little bit of electronically assisted astronomy. So it's using cameras and software not to make the absolute prettiest or best picture, but just as a tool to expand what you can see farther, to help you observe deeper and farther with what you have. So what I've been playing with is using commercially available little CCD or closed caption TV camera lenses. They're really cheap, really fast, like f1.4 for $30. And really high sensitivity, low noise CMOS camera on a stationary tripod. The combination works out where you're wide enough and short enough shutter speed that you don't get into star trailing. You can just sort of hip fire into the sky and just start taking sub exposures. And then the real trick is a little tablet running live stacking software. Is my favorite. The one I'm using is SharpCap, so it takes all those little short exposures, averages them together, gets rid of most of the noise, and you can get some pretty good results. So here's one of the first images I got. This is in Gemini. There's M25. So you can see M25 here. There's Monkey Head Nebula. You probably just barely see it, and just the tiniest hint of the jellyfish. But this is a big, giant, wide field view. But what's really exciting about this to me is the opportunity to use it to augment binocular outreach. Because it's really hard to tell people to look there and ask them, do they see the fuzzy thing between those points, and no one has no idea what they're supposed to be looking for. So if we could use the camera to essentially project this view so they can get familiar with what stars they'll see, because this is about, I think, 11 degrees by 8 degrees, and a 7 by 35 binocular is about 9 degrees. So it's a pretty close match for what they'll be seeing when they get there. So they can use it to sort of know that, if they see 3 stars or 4 stars in a row, maybe they should see something over there. So far, I've had pretty good success with the limited deployment that I've tried it at. It's still evolving, a lot changing. But so far, so good. And so what I've been doing is I just show up with a table. I probably the guy with a million things unloading the car, everyone's set up. I'm still there pulling stuff out of the trunk. But it's fun to get people engaged, and they get to use the binoculars and find things on their own. It gives them that little victory. It makes it less intimidating. It's just a pair of binoculars. You can go out and get it. It shows them that you can find stuff. It's out there. You can see it. So for people that get in a lot of trouble, I have a green laser pointer mounted on it. So if they can't get there grossly, I'll try and point out a star hop between that star and that star, halfway between or 2/3 between, and then they should see this field. And once they see this field, then they can find it on their own. But so far, it's been pretty successful. You kind of need the right age group. It has to be dark enough that you can see a projector, and it has to be clear enough that you can use binoculars and also for the camera to work. So I haven't had too many chances to fully deploy it. But, any questions? I have a couple example images farther. If there are none. On any of the topics, 3D printing and casting. Yep.
Yes. Can you easily produce a number of these mounts?
The aluminum one? The Star Tracker, the bomb came out to be for hard components that aren't 3D printed. It was about, I think, $45 worth of bearings and pulleys and motors and Arduino pieces, not including the tripod or the ball head. This is assuming someone has some equipment, and probably $15 worth of 3D printing. Most of the rest is just labor and assembly and design time. But for someone else to copy and paste it, they don't have any of the design time. It's just get enough 3D printer filament, print the parts, and you don't actually have to have a 3D printer. It's almost like Uber, but for 3D printing. There's a service out there called 3D Hubs. So there's a lot to learn about 3D printing, and there's a lot of knowledge and troubleshooting. It's an entire hobby in its own. It's a good thing for a cloudy man. But you don't want to go through that, or you don't want to buy a computer or manage it and upkeep it. There's a service out there, 3D Hubs, where you can just send them the file and pay a pretty affordable number. I think, let's see, the little bracket that I have here, I have a thread on the process of the little camera, and like the little bracket right here that holds 2 finder scopes and a camera, a 1.5, I think was only $10 printed from 3D Hubs, and they'll mail it to you. You can specify the material. So it's, I mean, a custom part that fits your thing. And if you get into design and you can really make bespoke pieces to match your gear exactly, like all of my solar filters are press fit onto the scopes to match them perfectly. They're tailored to each scope. But I'm not planning on going into production mode. Once I figure out all the bugs, I'm just going to release it to one of the repositories, and anyone interested can follow along. Yep, question back there?
Do you have to like pack the sand so that the aluminum doesn't like seep into it?
Yeah, so the sand, as I glossed over that, so when you're doing sand casting, where you're making that sand castle and pulling the part up, the consistency of the sand is critical. So it's, the sand I'm using is pretty fine mesh sand, has about 10% clay. The clay is like a binder, so when you compress it, it makes a good solid dirt clod, but it's not too thick that it forms, you know, an impermeable block, because the gas has to come out. If the gas had nowhere to go, then you get bubbles in the casting. So there's a fine line for the sand. It has to have a little bit of clay and a little bit of moisture. Not enough moisture, it crumbles. Too much moisture, and it starts bubbling, popping, boiling. Metal gets it. Yeah, steam explosions. So if you're even considering this, absolutely scour the internet for all the safety information you can find, because this is serious stuff. Water, when it boils, it expands 16 times. If that volume has nowhere to go, and you're on the other end of the puddle of molten metal, you know, molten metal will fly if you dump on water. So there's a lot to look out for. It's scary stuff, but if you know, you're aware of the precautions and you're safe, it's routine after a while.
Yeah. You do need to get sand from a legitimate casting place to be sure you're getting good stuff.
It helps significantly. I started out with clay sand. It works. But when I bought 90 mesh olivine sand from a trusted supply, it was like a whole new world. It was beautiful. All my troubles went away, but it's possible. It's a pain in the butt because you don't know what you're going to get when you buy Quikrete or clay sand, and you have to sift it yourself. But when you buy like perfectly homogeneous, great sand from a foundry house, it makes casting a breeze.
It's safer. It's, you know, people who've had.
And the moisture is
so bad.
Important to manage.
Yeah.
So, in the case of the lost phone, you mentioned, you know, you get something that you only need to do a little bit of machining. What do you do to compensate for the size? I mean, you need it a little bit larger if you can.
Yes. So there's two things you have to account for. There is machining margin. If there's a surface you know you're going to machine, you want to leave, you know, a 16th of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch extra. And there's also the metal shrinkage. When it solidifies, it shrinks, but then it's still 500 degrees Fahrenheit and cools down, and thermally it too. So there's a little bit of adjustment that if you're making very precise parts, it matters. But for this part here, it didn't matter so much because I took my impressions from real parts, which were final size, but I just, you know, cut it a little loose and sloppy, and as long as it comes together fine, it's okay.
Corey, just some comments. On your black telescope there, last year, Judge Roberts of our club said he could make me up some dovetail brackets like that would plug onto an SLR. And that was my first introduction to 3D machining. But you showed the picture of the interferometer base that Dale Eason designed. And I'm a member of the interferometry group, there it is there. And Dale has come up with a software that will measure the interference pattern with an interferometer, which is pictured there, and computer analyze it with very complex mathematics, but plot out very exactly the surface of your mirror. So you really know whether you get a 10th wave or 20th wave. And if it's not, it shows you where the highest points are, and you can correct it. But anyway, George and I together looked up Thingiverse, and we found the files for this. This is a slightly earlier version that I'll brought along for the members to see, but the concept is pretty much the same with some improvements on the actual interferometer head. Now, interferometers, you go to Zygo, you're talking about $40,000 and up to analyze optics. There was one of our members who made, his name is John Buccini, and he made a compact interferometer for $15,000, and that was bare bones. His daughter helped him with assembly work. Well, all of a sudden, we have a design from a German optical imaging scientist that comes up with a little flat mirror, a beam splitter, and a diverger lens, plus your telescope mirror. And you're only going to put in like $25 or $30 into that. And then when you make the 3D translator, which is shown here, you've got something for about $50 or so, because George isn't charging me full price for his, I think he has 3 machines running at the same time overnight. But anyway, we were going to do it in all black, and then we found out that the multicolor is a lot easier to avoid making putting things together upside down, which happened to me, and we had to go back and study the drawings and pictures to figure out what had gone wrong. But it was, when you design something, you always want to design it so it only goes together one way, and only one way. And every engineer has to learn that. So I'll have that on display on the table.
It's amazing. Like that, to me, that is the true amazing thing about 3D printing is when you take most of the skill away from turning a digital file into a material object, and you can host those digital files online. So your idea, it's available to the world. So you can have this massive stepwise change in available technology just by allowing
a 3-axis translator alone used to cost us $950.
Crazy.
Well, you can get them cheaper used, but very, very difficult to find. This does exactly the same job, and very smooth motion, very accurate. You can adjust the fringes exactly the way the computer wants them. Of course, it does involve needing a camera as well. So the photograph.
I think I had seen the article on the ATM section of Cloudy Nights. It's really exciting, especially the software.
Unfortunately, I have a thing against cloudy nights. Too many quote unquote experts out there that don't know a damn thing about optics.
Tell me about the SharpCap software.
SharpCap. So I probably have less than 10 or 15 hours under my belt, but I guess it started out primarily as planetary imaging, but it's really starting to grow into a niche of live imaging or live stacking. So you can use your camera. Helps if you have high sensitivity, low read noise. Crank the gain, have disgusting, ugly, noisy pictures, but fast. And as those pictures stream in, the software will stack and average them out. So the noise is mostly random once you subtract the darks. And the more pictures you have, all that random noise starts to cancel out and you get more bit depth. And when you crank the gain, you lose your...
Is this freeware?
Kind of. There's a free version of it, but there are some very valuable features that you get access to with the Pro version. Like that polar alignment process, that's a part of the program. So you take your right ascension, take a picture towards the North Pole, rotate it 90 degrees, take another picture, plate solves the 2 pictures, sees how it moves, and then it highlights the stars in the field using the live camera feed. And then it shows you 1 star, and it shows you a target, and it says, adjust your mount base, not the equatorial motion, but the base, until that star is lined up, and it gets you pretty close. I don't have an equatorial mount, so I've never
Does this use JPEGs through USB or what?
I think there's a lot of options. You can do a direct view, which is like a webcam interface on Microsoft. You can do ASCOM drivers. You can do native camera drivers. Just recently they added a folder watchdog, so you can just have some other completely unrelated program capturing pictures and dropping it in a folder. The program will see it. But I've only played around with the program a little bit, and I've only strictly used it for live stacking, but it's been pretty fun.
Thank you. Well, if there are other questions, perhaps we could wait till we adjourn the meeting and then you can talk to Corey directly. Again, Mike Hill provided refreshments tonight. They're across the hall. They're right over there. So I'd like to thank everybody to come. Do I need to get a motion and adjourn the meeting, or do I just do it?
Just do it.
Yes?
You're the man.